Namaste from Chicago in the US. It is morning here, but you have spent an entire day listening to fascinating people with interesting knowledge and wisdom. And I am grateful that you decided to stay here for my session today. But because your brains are very full, let's do a combination exercise of neuroscience and silliness to bring us all together so that we can get as much as we can out of our time together. So to do that, what I will ask you to do, it's participation. So I will ask you on the count of 3 to push down the space bar on your computer, which will unmute you. And then together we will go. Okay, so 3, 2, 1, space bar, go. Do it. Do it again. Wonderful. Finger off space bar. Okay. The technical term for this is a state change. And if you would like to know what that means, then type state change in the chat, and sometime before our program is over, I will explain why this works. So now let's dive right in. I remember well being in the position that you're in. I had just finished getting my degrees in psychology and English, and I needed to interview for a job. And this is where I started to work. St. Joseph's Home for Children, which is the story you just heard about Fred and the giant knife. What I wish I had known then is all of the things I know now about how to interview for a job and to say the right things that increase the chances that I would get hired. The good news for you is that for the last 28 years, I've had my own communication practice, which means that every day I talk to people about getting work and the things that I have learned that have allowed me to be in business all these many years, I'm about to share with you. Here's how today will look. We're going to talk about 3 things specifically: how to write down your goals and the importance of this from a psychology and a neuroscience perspective, how to create the messages you're going to share during an interview, and then how to tell useful stories. And frankly, if we have some extra time, I'll have a few bonuses for you as well. But let's begin. Write your goals. This is the first thing you will do to prepare for any interview. And you write goals down longhand for a reason. It engages your right brain, which is your creative side. It engages your left brain. Your creative side is engaged because you're literally writing things down. You're moving your hand across a piece of paper. Your left brain is engaged because you're using words. So you have both sides of your brain working with you. The other thing is that you're using your conscious and your subconscious mind. Your conscious mind can remember somewhere between 10 to 50 bits of information. Your subconscious mind can process 14 million bits of information per second. So for example, right now, your subconscious mind knows how your behind feels in your chair. So how many of you are now thinking about how your behind feels in the chair? Right. Your subconscious mind knew this before, but your conscious mind told it it was important. So it started bubbling it up. This is what happens when you write a goal. Your conscious mind tells your subconscious mind what it wants. And then it makes all of these connections with all of this information that you have and lets things come up to help you. Here's the important thing to know about your subconscious mind, however. It cannot tell the difference between a positive message and a negative message. Meaning that if you say to yourself, oh, they're never going to hire me, guess what? Your subconscious mind will hear, never going to hire me, and it will find ways for you to mess up the interview. So always feed your subconscious mind positive messages. The message that, yes, indeed, this is a job I want and I will get it. So this is the power of goals in your brain. And when you write your goals, let's move me over here. The acronym for this is SMART goals. You want your goals to be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. Specific. So you know you're going to have a half an hour of time to speak with this person on a particular day. Measurable. You want to make sure that you set goals that you'll know whether or not you've reached them. Attainable, meaning that you want to be able to make that happen in the amount of time. So for example, an unattainable goal might be that they offer you the job on the spot. Don't set a goal that you know you can't reach, because that means it disincents you. It means that you will give up because you know it's not possible. Relevant, meaning that it's important for what it is that you want to achieve. You could have a goal of wearing, having a good hair day, and maybe that won't be important to getting a job if you happen to have the same haircut all the time. And timely is what we talked about before, in 30 minutes. So a good goal for you, for example, for an interview would be within 30 minutes on 4 June, I will ask good questions, listen more than I speak, present my value, so that they will want to take the interview to the next step. You see how much different that is, how specific that is, versus I want to have a good interview. When you do this, you engage your brain and you get excited about this interview, as opposed to worrying about it. So the first thing you do is you sit down and write your goals, and you use specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely when you write a goal. So let's do a little bit of this together. When you think about what it is you want to achieve in an interview, so get ready to type things in the chat. What kind of impression do you want to give somebody in a job interview? So write in the chat what you want people to think of you in this job interview, because this will become one of your goals. So go ahead. What kind of impression do you want to make? Do you want people to think you're intelligent? Do you want people to think you're smart? Do you want people to think that you have something to give? Okay, so they're starting to come in. You want them to have an optimistic impression, or give an optimistic impression of yourself. Positive and smart, good, reliable, a leader. These are all wonderful. These are wonderful things that you will want to include, reliable, promising, things you will want to include in your goals, the impressions that you want to make with the person who's going to hire you. This is wonderful. Already you're on your way to creating goals. Best version of me, love that. Be a little bit more specific though, because the best version of you in speaking, the best version of you in how you look, be specific, because that helps your brain, your subconscious mind, bubble up the things that you can actually do. This is great. Okay, so let's move on to the next thing. Now that you, oh, by the way, do you have any questions about what we've talked about so far? Because I'll break after every section to answer any questions that you have. So now you know the power of writing goals, what it does for you in your brain, and now you know the best way to write goals. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to write them in the chat or to ask, because I'm here to make sure you get what you need. And so far I'm seeing no ma'ams, but if you do have any questions, feel free to write them and I will get to them. So that's the first thing you do. You write down your goals. Now you know the power of this. The second thing you do is you create the messages that you wish to share in this conversation that is your interview. And I have here, remember the question behind the question. No matter what question people ask, the question behind it is, are you the right person for this job? Are you the right person for the job? That is their goal, to hire someone who's going to fit in well and who will make a contribution. So whatever question they ask, know that's the question behind it. And that is the question that you need to answer. And in part of that, remember what I call the rule of three. So this is neuroscience again. People can only hold three ideas in their short-term memory without their memory becoming full. So if you go into an interview and there are 5 things that you want to share, by the time you get to number 4, they have lost number 1. What this means for us then is that it's very important for us to sit down and think, what are the 3 things I want them to remember once the interview is over? And to emphasize those things and to reinforce those things so we make sure that our messages come across clearly and succinctly. So you could write down 10 different messages. You could brainstorm and write down 10 different messages that you want people to remember. And then once you have that list, pick the top 3. And I'll be even more helpful there on what kinds of messages it is that you need to share that people who are interviewing you for a position really want to know. And they are these 3. What is the pain the organization is in? What is the experience that you have to deal with this pain? And what is your vision for what life will be like after they hire you and you're doing a good job? So let's take them one by one. Pain. Before you interview for any position, you're smart. You'll do your research on the organization, and you'll figure out what their problems are. Because I'm here to tell you, no one will ever hire you because you're good looking. I'm sorry. What they will hire you for is because they have a problem and they need your help to solve it. And now that you know this, it is your job before you ever do any interview to find out what the pain is in this organization that this job will help solve. And one of the messages that you will share is, I know your organization is facing this pain. So I told you that my first job was as a counselor in a home for troubled boys. If I were using this formula, I could say to them, your pain, there are 3 pains that you have. The first is the pain of making sure that someone you hire is a good fit. The second pain you have is making sure that this person will work with these children and bring them to a better place. And the third pain that you have is turnover, because this is a highly stressful job. When I say these things to somebody who's interviewing me for this position, they think, she knows this job. She understands. So the first thing you do is talk about what the organization's pain is so that they understand that you understand. The second type of message you'll want to share is your experience. And so because you're usually pretty young in your career at this point, you'll talk about the things that you've studied. You'll talk about the situations that you've been in. Perhaps you've had an internship in the field. And even if your internship has not been in the field, you have learned things. So you will talk about, these are the responsibilities for the job. Here is why I'm a good fit. I know these things. I can do these things. I can share these things. That's what's important. You want to show how you fit, the benefit of working with you. So that is your experience. And once again, you can come up with up to 3 messages about your experience, which make it clear that you would be the right person to hire. You're doing their job for them. You're showing them you understand the organization and you have the experience, either in your education or in the jobs that you've had or in your life experience that makes you the right person for this position. This is where most people stop, but not you. You're going to go on to the third message that you have, which is vision. Research shows that one of the most important words in any language is the word imagine. So to invite people to imagine what this job would look like after they've hired you, after you've been there for a year, because you'll come into this interview with ideas on how you want to make this a better place to work by solving the pain, by applying your experience. And how will this place look in 6 months or in a year after you've been there? And you paint this picture of how the department or the area will look because you have made these contributions. You invite somebody to see the future of having hired you and all the benefits they'll get from it. These are three very powerful messages. You understand their pain, you have the experience to solve this problem, and third, this is what the future will look like because they've hired you. So one of the things you'll do is you'll brainstorm on all of these different areas, and once again, you'll pick the top three because you know people can only hold 3 ideas. No 4 or 5 pain messages, only 3. And the top 3, which means you're focused on the things that are truly important. So creating your messages. Let's have you pick one of these as well. Experience. You already know the kind of position you want to have. So in the chat, type one of the things you want people to know about your experience. It could be how you've worked together on teams, what you have studied that makes you a good person to be a good addition to this team. So type in the clearest, clearest of speech I've heard. Thank you. Okay, so type in one thing, one quality that you have, one experience that you have that will be a contribution to the next place that you work. So we have team leading, hardworking. These are good. Leadership. These are good points. These are things that a potential employer will want to know about you. Good working under pressure, understanding that you're assertive, that you're knowledgeable. Yes, these are all points that you will want to share. You'll want to make them among your key messages. This is perfect. See, already you're well on your way. And if anyone has any questions about creating clear messages, please type them in the chat or ask them, because I want to make sure that you get the information you need. But now it makes your preparation really clear, doesn't it? So you'll go in there with a goal, you know what you want to achieve, and now you'll go in there with the 3 key messages that will connect with a potential employer, the pain the organization is facing, the experience that you have that will help them solve that pain, and then your vision for how things will look after they've hired you and you've made a difference there. Good. Then that'll take us to number 3. And this is something I rarely see anywhere, so you are already going to have an edge. Tell useful stories. It's one thing to say that I'm knowledgeable. It's another thing to tell me a story so I understand how your knowledge will help me as your future employer. So, for example, I've got 2 stories here. And by the way, they are created by a woman whose name is Annette Simmons. She wrote a book called Whoever Tells the Best Story Wins. And here are 2 of the types of stories that you can tell strategically that will make a good impression on people. The first type of story is called a who I am story. So this is a story that tells about a mistake that you've made or a flaw that you have and what you have learned from it. Because the idea is to show that you are human and approachable. So for example, if I were going to tell you a who I am story, I could tell you a little bit more about the story that you heard in the introduction. My first job when I was a counselor. And I would say to you, Fred is a 14-year-old boy standing 3 feet away from me. But in this moment, I cannot tell you anything about how Fred looks because all I can see is that he is holding the world's largest machete, saying, if you try to call for help, I'm going to cut you. I am the only adult in a boys' group home. Fred ran away 3 days ago, and now he's back. And when he showed up, I thought, I'm the adult. I need to tell Fred what to do. So I told Fred, go to intake. You can't be here until they clear you. And Fred said to me, I'm going to my room. It's like, Fred, why are we having this conversation? Just go to intake. No, I'm going to my room. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. Just go to intake. No, I'm going to my room. So I go into the office to call for backup to have somebody work with the other boys while I work with Fred to get him to intake. And that's when he pulls out this giant machete. And he brings it down and chops the cord on the phone, my only lifeline to the outside world. And now I know that at that moment, I lost my mind. All I can do is babble. So I say, but Fred, I like you and you like me and you don't want to hurt me. And there's nothing in how Fred's looking at me that says he's agreeing with anything I'm saying. So I just keep babbling. And you don't want to get into the world of hurt you're going to get into if you hurt me. At which point I see Fred blink. And later he'll say to me, I started thinking about what my life would be like if I knifed you. I wouldn't be living in Daniel Cottage with everybody else. The police would come and they would take me and lock me up in jail. All I saw was Fred blink. And somehow I knew it was my chance. So I said to him, Fred, just make it easy on yourself and hand me the knife. And I was scared to death. He was going to bring that knife down and chop my hand. But I knew I had to keep my hand out there. I knew I had to show Fred I thought he was a good kid and give him the chance to act like one. I can't tell you how long I stood there sweating through everything I had on. And so Fred finally took a sigh and handed me the knife. And then we sat down and talked. And later, my supervisor came in. And he wanted to kick Fred out of the program because we can't have kids bringing knives in and threatening staff with them. And I said, but we have to keep Fred. He trusted me. And I was telling Fred what to do. And what I needed to do was to listen to Fred. And once I listened, everything got better. We kept Fred and he graduated from the program. And he gave me a marvelous lesson, which is, you need to learn how to reach unreachable people and spend time doing that and connecting with people and listening to people, and better things will happen. So that's a who I am story. I told you about a mistake that I made. I was telling Fred what to do rather than listening to him, and then what I learned about it. So type into the chat some of the things that you learned about me as I told this story. Some of the qualities I had, the mistakes I made, some of the things that you learned. Just type them in the chat. What did you get from that story where I shared this mistake that I made? And then you learned more about who I am. Because a lot of times what I'll see is, okay, strong person, I see, good. Resilient, good. Very composed, I didn't feel quite that way at the time. A quick thinker, okay, wonderful things. Because if I had said to you, guess what? I'm resilient, I'm a quick thinker, I can do empathic listening, you would have no reason at all to believe me. But because I told you a story and I gave you an example of this, you came to those conclusions on your own. This is what a powerful story does. It allows you to show people rather than tell people. The second type of story that you may want to tell in an interview situation is called a why I'm here story. And the purpose of this story is to talk about you don't have a hidden agenda. You are actually here to help. So I'll tell you a why I'm here story. I was asked to give a 15-minute keynote address to a bunch of high school students who had come to an evening to work on their resumes. And they told me the title of my speech, which was The Power of Resume, which already had me kind of bored. I didn't want to talk about the power of resume. And I thought, yeah, I can just imagine what these kids are thinking. Some old woman is up there talking to them about the power of resume. I'd check out too. I needed to find a way in. So I stood up in front of them and I said, if you were to ask any of the adults here who are helping you with your resume tonight, what they thought about writing their own resumes, and they were being honest, they would give you a look like a cat coughing up a fur ball. None of us like to do our resumes. But we won't get a job unless we do. So how do we turn this into a better experience? Since it's what you have to do tonight. So what I want you to do is shout out your favorite superheroes. And you can type your favorite superheroes in the chat too. So it could be, I heard Spider-Man, I heard Batman, I heard Wonder Woman, I heard Black Panther, Captain America I see in the chat, and and Supergirl. There you go. Somebody already nailed it. And I said, that's great. An even better answer would be yourself, because you have a skill or a talent that, at least one, that none of your friends or family have. You are your own superhero. So the job of your resume is to tell stories about your superpower, to show a future employer how lucky they would be to have you doing it there. So a why I'm here story talks about you're here to help people, and you overcome any impression they might have that you're not here to help them. And let me give you just a little bit of information about the power of story anyway. Our brains are wired for stories. So let's get back to neuroscience and the psychology aspect of it. When you tell me a good story, what happens is that you bypass all the resistance in my frontal cortex and speak directly to my emotional brain. That is where I make decisions. So tell me a good story. You've already lowered my resistance to anything you're about to suggest. This is powerful stuff. And then when you include details, what ends up happening is that here's something tricky about your brain. Your brain cannot tell the difference between something you imagine and something that's actually going on. So when I was telling you the story about Fred and the knife, my brain was reacting as though I was actually back there having this go on. So the fear center in my brain, my amygdala, was lighting up as though I'm in danger. When I was talking about seeing the knife, my visual cortex was lighting up. When I was talking about sweating, my sensory cortex was lighting up as though I was actually sweating. That's interesting. But what's cool is that your brain was lighting up in the same way. Your fear center lit up, your visual cortex lit up, your sensory cortex lit up, as though we were in this together, which means you tell me a good story. And what ends up happening is that our brains are in sync with each other. Our neurons are firing in the same way, which is one of the reasons why resistance gets lower. We now have those 3 key messages you want to share. Find a story that talks about your experience and share that. And what ends up happening then is that you help people visualize, see who you are. Rather than tell them, you show them. And you bypass all the resistance in their thinking brain. You speak to their limbic system, to their emotional brain, and then you have this great connection on a molecular level. That's the power of story. So if anybody has any questions on stories, feel free to type them into the chat. And we have a little time, so let me do the bonus. The bonus number 1, prepare your video handshake, because most of you are going to be interviewing by a computer rather than in person. So there are a couple of things that you need to know in advance that will be helpful. First, what to wear. You already do your research, so you'll go online. You'll see how people are pictured on the websites. What kind of clothes are they wearing? So wear clothes that are similar to those. If you're interviewing for a job where everybody wears suits, wear a suit. If you're interviewing for a job where everybody is in jeans, do yourself a favor and dress one level up, because you want to show that you're professional. And make sure that your clothes are very clean and simple, and that you don't wear colors that go wah-wah on the screen. Next, check your background. You want to keep it very simple, so declutter it. Make sure that you have good lighting so people can see your face. Make sure it's all very clean, because what you want to do is have them focus on your face and connect with you, not be looking at all the things that are going on in the background. So if you can, and which gives us the control of your environment. If there are other people that you're living with, let them know you're going to need some peace and quiet during this time. If you have a barking dog, have somebody take your barking dog out of the house. You need to clear that space, number 1, so people can hear you and understand what you're saying and not be distracted. And number 2, so that you're not distracted. And so you don't get distracted by some noise going on and lose your train of thought. So control your environment, set these things up, and do Zoom tests, because you know Zoom accounts are free. So do a test to see how you look and how you come off. Which then takes us to the second bonus. Give your attention. So this is what you do during the interview. Eye contact. Research shows that 80% of the people in the world value eye contact, but computers are not set up for eye contact. Here's what I do whenever I'm in a meeting, and you've already experienced it some. I tell people, when I'm speaking, I'm going to look directly into the camera because I want you to know I'm speaking to you. But when you're speaking, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at your image on my screen, which may appear that I'm not looking at you. But what I'm doing is I'm getting the entire image of you. I want to see your background. I want to see how you look. I want to pick up on your body language. And when you set this up at the beginning, so they know why you're looking at the camera or why you're not looking at the camera, it helps them relax and understand. I don't hear anybody else talking about this. So once again, you create connection when you speak by looking in the camera, and when they speak, you look at them, and they know that you're paying attention to them. That is not that your attention has wandered. Okay, smile. There is in the US a phrase, it is called resting bitch face. What this means is that when people are concentrating and they're not speaking, their faces oftentimes look unfriendly, like this. Okay, if I want you to hire me, the last thing I want you to see is this. Pay attention to what your face is doing when you are not speaking. And the best resting face to have is one that has a slight smile. So no big teeth, because that looks fake. Just give me a nice smile. And because we're nervous, we're not paying attention to whether or not we're smiling. But raise that in your consciousness level, because people want to be around people who are friendlier. And if you're not friendly during a job interview, they figure you're not going to be friendly once you show up on their doorstep. So smile and listen. Listen, there are 2 types of listening. The first is listen to respond. So you listen to what's going on and you're thinking about what you're going to say next when the person stops speaking. Okay, there is also a deeper level of listening, listening for understanding and empathy. So if a person is talking about, a person who's interviewing you is talking about the tough day that he or she had before the interview started, give them a little bit of empathy. Oh, that's difficult, as opposed to saying, oh, you think that's a problem? Here's something that I'm facing. No, not going to build rapport. So be there for them and obviously ask questions. Do this in advance because a lot of times there's so much going on, it's hard to focus in the moment. So ask questions, write them down in advance so you have them there. And then when the point comes up that it's opportune to ask, you will be prepared. All right, so those are our 2 bonuses. We've covered a lot of ground today, haven't we? In a short amount of time. Now you know you need to write your goals and you know the importance of them. It gets your short-term memory and your long-term memory and your left and your right brain and your subconscious mind and your conscious mind in tune to be specific and get what you want. So specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. Makes it very clear what you want and helps you bring that into being. Create your messages. Now you know you have 3. There's one about the pain of the organization, so you make it about them. There's one about your experience, the gifts that you bring, and then your vision, what life will be like once they've hired you and you are there doing a great job. And now you know 2, and you know the 3. 3 is important. People cannot remember more than 3 things in their short-term memory. And finally, you know now the power of story. Tell a who I am story, which explains a mistake that you've made, but what you've learned from it. And a why I'm here story, which explains that you're here to help people and to work with them, and you don't have a hidden agenda. And now you have those 2 bonuses as well. All right. Guess what? I've taken notes for you. And if you want the notes from this presentation, all you need to do is send me an email at lynne@lynnefranklin.com and put the word interview in the subject line. And if you want to say something nice in the email text, I'll be happy to take that. But once you do that, I will email you the notes, the outline from all of the stuff I've covered so that you have that handy. And here you'll also see a link to my TEDx talk, How to Be a Mind Reader. 11 minutes, it's good information, which is also helpful for you in a job interview. I have a YouTube channel, which has all kinds of great videos on it about how to be more persuasive and how to connect with people. I do a weekly blog. 1 week it's a short article. The next week it's a short video. If you like the stuff I've talked about today and want to get a steady diet of it, that's it. That's where you can find it. Sign up. And then finally, I'm on LinkedIn. If you want to connect on LinkedIn, let's do that. Now, are there any final questions in the minute we have left? And I don't know about the people who are running this, but if you want to stay a little extra time and ask some questions, I will be happy to do that because it's been a pleasure being with you this morning. And the skills that we've talked about, these will serve you for your entire career. And I am so grateful for the chance to share them with you. And let me see if I can do this right. Dhanyavad. Thank you. Thank you for spending this time with me.
Thank you so much, ma'am. We actually do have a few questions in the chat box as well as on the Q&A section of the video. I will be taking them up so you can answer them accordingly. There are a few questions which ask about how one can improve their communication skills. Because I think one comment that you did mention while you were speaking is your speech is so clear. We were all so engrossed into what you were saying that I don't think we barely looked a minute away and got distracted for even a second. So how can one talk in a way that we can grasp your attention and be able to retain it?
Okay, so the first thing is record yourself as you speak. And I know we all hate the sound of our voices, but what you're looking for is data. So this is like an experiment. You're listening to how quickly you speak, how well you enunciate, and then the things and the things that you do well that you do not need to change. But the other things, and it could be some people mumble at the end of a sentence, for example. They run out of air. Their sentence is too long, so by the time they finish speaking, they've run out of air, and and we all want to breathe with them. And when you get nervous, you have a tendency to do these things. So have somebody interview you, do a mock interview, and play it back. And you don't play it back to beat yourself up. You are looking and listening for things that you do that you can do better, and the things that you already do well that you don't need to mess with. So those are two things that you can do. Record yourself. And once again, use the idea of the power of three. People can only hold three ideas in their short-term memory. So don't overload them with information. Then they will forget. So speak clearly because you've paid attention to it, and then give clear messages and know what those are in advance and stick to those things. It helps everybody else. Good question. Thank you. Next one.
There's another question. Is there any specific process in choosing the right story which would connect with the most of the viewers?
Okay, so what I recommend on stories is literally sitting down and doing a brainstorming session with yourself. What kinds of stories do I have? Because the first thing I hear from everybody is, oh, I don't have any stories. Well, gee, the story of you being here today and all of the things that you've learned, that's a story. Everything is a story. And when you decide that there are good stories all around you, you start paying attention, and then you start writing them down. So for example, the two stories I told today, the one about Fred with the machete and the other one about the high school kids who had to write resumes, I picked those stories because I knew they would be more appealing to you. So you pick stories that you know will have a good message for the people you're trying to reach. If I were speaking before a group of engineers, my stories would be much different. So what you do is you create a portfolio of stories that you can draw upon. And when you're doing an interview, you take a look at these different types of stories, and then you figure out which one is going to make the most sense to tell here. And that's what you share. So I call it strategic storytelling. You tell a story for a reason. You don't just tell a story. And tell you what, when I send you the notes from today, I will send you the entire cheat sheet from the Annette Simmons book, Whoever Tells the Best Story Wins, so you can see the different types of stories, and the ones that you're brainstorming, so you can have good stories to tell. Okay, next question.
Tend to feel anxious during an interview. So what can we do at that point to calm our nerves?
The best thing that you can do is breathe. When we are nervous, we stop breathing, we hold our breath. So breathe. Also sit with both of your feet on the floor, because this brings the earth's energy up into you and makes you literally feel grounded. So breathe calmly. And if it's possible, you can even say, I'm a little bit nervous. I just need to take a breath. This makes you human to the other person, who probably remembers when he or she was in an interview situation and understands. Because the most calming breath you can do, and we'll do it together, is one where you inhale for a certain number of beats and you exhale for twice that amount. So let's do that. We're going to inhale for 3 beats, and then we're going to exhale for 6. And this is great to do before you start an interview. So let's inhale 1001, 1002, 1003, exhale, 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005, 1006. You can feel your body calming down already. So do that beforehand. As a matter of fact, do things you know calm you. I was working with the president of a company who would get very nervous before he had to do phone calls with investors. And I said to him, find yourself a nice private place and do the downward facing dog. Because what that does is it slows down your breath, it sends blood down to your brain, it calms you. Just hold that pose before you do the interview. And the same thing may work for you. So find the things that help you feel calm and do that. And when you feel your mind racing in an interview, pause and take a breath. And once again, and if you say, I'm so excited about this job and I'm so excited about the chance to work with you, I just need to take a breath. Nobody does that, and it will make you different and human. So good question. We all get anxious during interviews. So do these things that calm you.
In the presentation, you mentioned that we should ask questions during an interview, and somebody has asked you to give an example for the same. What kind of questions should we ask?
Okay, so there are basically there are a couple of types of questions you can ask, and you will create the one that is specific to this organization. It could be, what kind of person do you want to hire? Who's the ideal person for this job? Because that will give you insight into what they're looking for. And then you can tie your answers back to the points that they've made, which shows, number one, that you've listened, and number two, that you have the qualities they seek. So that's a good question. What's the ideal person for this job? You know, what is the biggest problem that that you need this person to deal with on this job? What's the biggest gift they can bring? What's the biggest problem that you need solved by the person who takes this job? Or what are the biggest challenges of doing this job successfully? And depending upon whether or not you have a clear indication of what this job is, you can certainly ask about the responsibilities of the job, because some of them may not be clear. And you can say, I really want to understand the job and to be clear about what it is that you're looking for. So can you tell me a little bit more about this? You can ask about their culture. Tell me, how do you describe the culture of your organization to people who aren't familiar with it? So these are deeper levels of questions that you can ask, which shows that you're thoughtful about what's going on and that you really do care and want to understand about the position, which, once again, most people believe that the person who's interviewing them has all the power, and this is an unequal relationship. But the truth is, this is a conversation where you have the same amount of power as the person who is interviewing, because frankly, you're also interviewing that person, aren't you? Because there will be jobs when somebody is interviewing you and you realize, I don't want to work here. This would be a terrible fit for me. You have just as much reason to interview them as they have to interview you, which is why you ask good questions. There are things you want to know to decide whether or not this is the right place for you. So write down those questions and ask them. It's not just that they have all the power and you just have to respond. You are there for a reason too, and make sure that you get your questions answered as well.
Another question we have is, would you say it's a good idea to be more yourself in an interview, or be the self that the interviewer or the organization wants to see?
Okay. So the first bit of advice I have is, don't apply for a job that is not you. And it's true. There have been times in all of our careers where we have applied for jobs that we knew were not a good fit, but we needed a job. All right. So if you have to do that because you need a job, then yes, Be the person you think they want you to be and get the job and get some income and then go find yourself a job that better fits you. It's part because we talked about the goals of an interview. You should also have a goal for any job you take and to know why you're taking that job. In this point in your career, it is rare that you will find the job that will be a fit for you for the rest of your life. When I went into the children's home and I was working with Fred and the other boys, my initial goal there was I'd spent all of these years on me and my education, and I wanted to give back to the community. And so I wanted a job where I could help people. That was my goal. And I quickly realized that social work was not a good place for me. It's true. Most people stayed in that job for about 6 months, and I stayed in it for a year. So I was at 22 a grizzled veteran in that job. But ultimately, I realized this is not where my gifts lie, and I needed to find a better place for me. So for me, today, and as you grow in your career, please be yourself. And certainly, there's something about being professional. It's true. The way you talk in an interview is going to be different than the way you speak with your friends. But it doesn't mean you have to be somebody else in an interview. It's true. If you have a tendency to slouch when you're hanging out with your friends, you'll probably sit up straight in an interview because you know that makes a better impression. That doesn't mean it isn't you. But be as much of yourself as you can, because the last thing you want to do is go into an environment where they are expecting you to be smiley and happy all the time because that's the way you were in the interview, and that's not who you are. You'll automatically, number one, set yourself up for failure, and number two, feel like an imposter. That these people would not accept you if they knew who you were. That's not the kind of experience you want to have. So my default answer is be yourself. But as somebody said in the chat earlier, be the best version of yourself in this instance.
With that, ma'am, we have come to an end of the questions that we had. Thank you.
In that case, then let me do one more, because I promised you I would talk about state changes, right? So keeping my promise, a state change happens when you want to change the level of energy in a room. So here's the neuroscience. People can only listen to a talking head for 7 minutes without their brains wandering off and going someplace else, which means that every 7 minutes when you are making a presentation of any kind, you have to create a state change. And so state changes, you saw at the beginning, it was writing in the chat. It was writing questions. It was listening to my stories and telling me what it was that you saw. State changes can be everything from asking people to imagine things, to ask each other questions, to ask you questions. What you do is every 7 minutes in any presentation you give, wherever you are for the rest of your life, you will ask people to engage with you so that you keep them in the room. Because your comment, oh, bless your soul, you said to me, you were so interested in what I was talking about that your attention didn't wander. Part of that was by design. I made sure I was asking you to do things with me, and it wasn't just me talking. So that's a state change. You change the level of energy in a room, whether or not you're with the person or you're on a computer screen, to keep them with you. Use it. State changes are wonderful.
Thank you so much, ma'am. To be very honest, on the day of the dry run, since I had personally seen a glimpse of the presentation, I was wondering if it would still be as much fun listening to you on the day, because I kind of had a glimpse of the presentation beforehand. But it was the most wonderful 1 hour I have had. And especially on a day where we've had around 8 to 9 sessions prior to this, and this was the last session of the day. I think the fact that you were still able to engage the audience in such an interactive way, that just goes on to show the impact that your message has. the one that you're giving us, and how we can use it ourselves. So thank you so much for taking time out and coming and speaking to our audience, relating with our vision, and giving your message to our young crowd. I hope that they have learned a lot from this and that they can take away some good inspiration for their interviews as well. With that
Dhanyavad.
said, with that said, I'd like to hand it over to the tech team to present to you with an e-certificate for your as a token of our appreciation and love for your work.
While we're waiting for that, I'm going to read the stuff in the chat.
Yes. In the meantime, can the tech team present the e-certificate?
Okay, it is not okay to lie just to appear to be a better person. So I'll answer that in the chat.
Thank you so much, ma'am.